Earlier on in my life, there was a period of 5 or 6 years where I worked as a nighttime security guard at a private school. I often refer to this as my cave period, where I spent every night in their huge library studying philosophy and theology and science and coming to a lot of the realizations that I'm talking about now in these videos. And one night, I was sitting in the office in the very back of one of the buildings I patrolled, and as I sat watching the door to the office, I noticed it was opening and closing very slowly. And I was absolutely fascinated by the fact that the air conditioning was somehow causing enough suction that it was pulling the door open, I assume just until the spring was able to pull it all the way back. And somehow between the spring and the air conditioning suction, it was managing to cause this door to just keep moving like this. And I kept watching it for maybe a minute or two, trying to figure out how somehow the narrowness of the hallway was allowing this bizarre phenomena to occur. Well, after about a minute or two, my roommate stepped out from behind the door. It was the last thing I could have possibly imagined because my roommate didn't come visit me that late, and of course the doors were all locked. Well, it turns out that just kind of on a lark, without calling, he had decided to drop by, and the door to the building hadn't quite latched correctly, so he just walked in, seeing me in the office, and decided to play a prank on me. Well, what struck me about this later is that my friend, especially at the time, was very much into the supernatural and ghosts, and he was trying to freak me out. And if he'd been sitting in that chair, watching that door open and close and open and close, it would have completely freaked him out. Of course, my mindset was very different. It was so scientific that I immediately jumped to the first scientific explanation I could think of. What intrigued me about that later was that in thinking back, both of us were or would have been wrong. And what was so fascinating to me about this was that we have these really strong convictions about what we believe, whether we believe, for instance, in science, or if we believe in God, in Christianity, or in the supernatural, in the occult, whatever. And those convictions are so strong that when we see some type of occurrence, that is immediately where our minds go. The problem being that sometimes it's not correct. Sometimes the actual explanation lies outside that. Now, of course, as a Christian, you could say, well, the explanation isn't really outside that, because let's say the explanation is scientific. Well, science is created by God. And the scientifically minded person could easily say, well, no, it's not actually outside the realm of science. It may just be something that hasn't been discovered yet or isn't understood yet. But the point is that our convictions are so strong that we will immediately jump to these explanations, which may be erroneous because we're incredibly narrow-minded. And this goes completely for both the scientific people and the religious people. We so strongly hold these ideas that we jump to conclusions because we aren't open-minded enough. And this is why it's so very important to question everything, literally everything, not question God, question science. The earth may not be round, we don't know. We become so stuck in our culture that the things that we've grown up with are so entrenched in our minds that we simply can't pull ourselves out of them. The people who originally realized that the world were round, and I don't mean Christopher Columbus, I obviously mean before that, were really the out-of-the-box thinkers of the time. The people who believed the world was flat had plenty of evidence for it. The world was, in fact, flat. You could just walk outside and see that the world was flat. And since we had no way of circumnavigating the globe at the time, it would seem absurd to think it was round. This is the kind of thing we always have to keep in mind. Because whether you're a religious person or a scientific person or an occultic person or however you decide to set your mindset, everything has to be questioned. Does that mean we have to question Jesus Christ? Absolutely. Do we have to question the President of the United States? Of course. Do we have to question Albert Einstein and Tyson and Hawkins. Absolutely. There is not a single idea or conviction that we have in our minds, not a single one, that shouldn't be questioned. We may not even exist. Now, granted, even though philosophers have debated about that for years and years, I've come to the conclusion that I have to at least assume I exist, otherwise I'm not going to get anywhere in life. But I do have to question it. So that's the kind of thing I want you to think about. Not what do you question in life, but what do you not question? And if there's anything that you don't question, go back and take a look at it. It may seem perfectly obvious, but it could be wrong. I'm the Urban Omnist. Thanks for listening. And guys, please don't forget to support us as much as possible by clicking subscribe, liking us on Facebook and Twitter, and please, 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 please send me those questions right at this address. Thank you very much. Again, I'm the Urban Omnist.